From crashing the Mars orbiter to losing thousands of Bitcoin, here are 13 of the most expensive mistakes in history. Number 13. Star Wars merchandising. When George Lucas persuaded Fox to release his film Star Wars: A New Hope, the company was not entirely on board. In fact, they were convinced that the film would flop. It's a miracle the movie was made in the first place. In order to save a little money, the studio came up with what they thought was a clever solution. They persuaded Lucas to pass on an additional $500,000 in directing fees. In exchange, Lucas kept all of the licensing and merchandising rights for himself. The movie, however, turned out to be a major culture-shifting hit. In 1978, more than 40 million Star Wars figures flew off the shelves, reaching a gross sale of more than $100 million. The notoriety and love for the movie only grew with time. It didn't even matter if a new movie was coming out. The toys continued to sell. For example, in 2011, a year where there was no new Star Wars movie, Star Wars toys brought in more than $3 billion. Not so good for Fox, but George Lucas became a billionaire. Number 12. Mars Climate Orbiter. In the late 1990s, NASA developed the Mars Climate Orbiter to study the climate on Mars, like its name suggests. The purpose of the orbiter was simple, and no one really expected anything to go wrong. It's also the general assumption that NASA checks and double-checks everything. While with the orbiter, something small but critical slipped through the cracks. On September 23, 1999, the Mars Climate Orbiter crashed into the red planet. Why? Because of math. Specifically because of a conversion error in the math. One engineering team in charge of the orbiter used metric units. Since most of planet Earth uses metric, that probably didn't appear to be a problem, except that the United States is one of a handful of countries still on the imperial system. A second team of engineers used feet and inches, and the math was not properly converted. This caused the navigation in the orbiter to go a little awry. After nearly 10 months in space, the Mars Climate Orbiter came too close to the planet's surface on the day it was supposed to enter Mars orbit. In a written statement, NASA said, "People sometimes make errors." This error cost $125 million and countless hours of work. Number 11. The Millenium Bridge. The Millenium Bridge in London opened in June of 2000. The designers called it a pure expression of engineering structure and were extremely proud of their cool, sleek bridge that cost £18.2 million. It was the first bridge to be built over the Thames in more than 100 years, and around 80,000 people crossed it on its opening day. Unfortunately, it had to be closed right away. Why? Because it wobbled. As more and more people started walking on the bridge, it started to sway. To keep their balance, people started planting their feet wide and walking in near-perfect unison. Engineers used lateral suspension in building the bridge. This innovation allows bridges to be built without tall supporting columns. When a large number of people walked on the bridge, it caused a phenomenon known as synchronous lateral excitation. Essentially, it swayed and twisted in regular intervals. As people started to walk in unison to adapt to the movement of the bridge, it just made it worse. The engineers blamed the synchronized footfall for the failure of the bridge. It was closed, and engineers installed dampers and springs to absorb the shock of all the pedestrian feet. The repair cost another £5 million. Today, the Millenium Bridge still carries the nickname of the Wobbly Bridge, even though it doesn't wobble anymore. Number 10. Destruction of a 150-year-old guitar. Quentin Tarantino's western, The Hateful Eight, is famous for several reasons, but I think one of the most important scenes is when Kurt Russell's character breaks a guitar. There was nothing particularly special about the acting of the moment, but it was all about the musical instrument. In the movie, Jennifer Leigh's character strums a guitar, and everyone told her to be super careful with it. It turns out the guitar used in that shot was a 150-year-old rare guitar rented from the Martin Guitar Museum in Pennsylvania. Russell's character is like, "Give me that guitar," and he snatches it from her hands and smashes it on a post. Apparently, Tarantino never yelled cut, and Russell was never told that it was the real thing. The scene was supposed to have been shot in two parts. First, Russell was supposed to snatch the guitar away, then the real guitar from the 1870s was supposed to be swapped out for a cheaper copy before the scene continued. Leigh's reaction on camera was completely authentic, and it was the one used in the film. Kurt Russell felt horrible. Some suspect Tarantino did it on purpose to get a real reaction out of Leigh. Whatever the reason, it was a $40,000 mistake. The guitar was only insured for its purchase price, which did not reflect its value as an irreplaceable museum artifact. This led to the Martin Guitar Museum's decision to never rent out its pieces for movies under any circumstances. Number 9. Misplaced comma. Punctuation matters, friends. In this case, a comma cost $1 million Canadian. Rogers Communications, a Canadian cable company, and Bell Alliant, a Canadian telephone company, signed a 14-page contract which regulated Rogers' use of telephone poles. Bell Alliant, citing the rules of punctuation, argued that they could cancel the contract with Rogers at any time without notice, and decided to cancel after 1 year. Rogers argued that they could use the poles for at least 5 years. Quite naturally, Rogers took Bell Alliant to court. There were actually 2 versions of the contract, one in English and one in French. The misplaced comma in the English version is the one that caused the fiasco. At first, courts ruled in favor of Bell Alliant. However, Rogers Communications appealed the decision using the French contract and won, but it still cost them a lot of money. Number 8. Trashed lottery ticket. In 2010, over 1,000 people claimed they won £113 million in the Euro Millions jackpot, but they had lost the ticket. A retired woman from England said she had purchased a ticket and wrote down the numbers in a notebook. She gave the ticket to her husband for safekeeping, but yeah, you probably already know what happened. When she saw the winning numbers written in her notepad, she couldn't believe it. She asked her husband for the ticket to confirm, and he confessed that he had actually thrown it away. She apparently buys the lottery ticket every week, and unless they can prove that they are the rightful winners, the couple has missed out on the biggest jackpot in the history of the Europe-wide lottery. Just FYI, if you happen to find a winning ticket, you're supposed to write to the lottery company describing the circumstances in which you found it. I wonder how many people do that. Number 7. Prestige oil spill. In 2002, a storm damaged one of the fuel tanks of an oil tanker named the Prestige, and it sank off the coast of Spain. The ship drifted for days at sea because it was refused docking permissions by Spain, Portugal, and France. Why the ship was refused docking permissions is unclear, but eventually the tanker split in half and sank, spilling the oil into the ocean. The total financial cost of the spillage was about 4 billion euros. Over 1,000 beaches in Spain and France were polluted, and the local fishing industry in Galicia was destroyed. At first, the entire crew was acquitted. Eventually, the Greek captain of the tanker was convicted by Spanish courts of recklessness, resulting in catastrophic environmental damage. He was sentenced to 9 months in prison, which he did not have to serve because of his advanced age. So in the end, no one at all was held responsible. Number 6. Lost Bitcoin fortune. Everyone who mined Bitcoin when the cryptocurrency first debuted have made millions. Well, everyone except for a British IT worker named James Howells. The laptop he had been using to mine Bitcoin crashed, and so he sold the computer parts on eBay but kept the hard drive in a drawer. He had about 7,500 Bitcoins, worth about $4 million at the time. However, in 2013, while he was moving and distracted by family life, Howells accidentally threw out the hard drive. Now the hard drive is worth about $108 million and lies under 4 years of trash in a landfill in Wales. It is estimated that around 2.78 million Bitcoins have been lost since 2009. According to an article in December 2017, Howells wanted to dig up the landfill to try to find the drive. However, digging up a landfill, which is full of dangerous gases, is an environmental disaster waiting to happen, so it's very unlikely. In any case, he said he wasn't going to cry about it. Number 5. AOL and Time Warner. Called one of the most disastrous business combinations in history, AOL and Time Warner merged into a single company in 2001. AOL purchased Time Warner for $182 billion. It seemed like an excellent idea at the time. AOL was a booming business with inflated stock. Experts claim that Time Warner's TV and magazine content would only complement AOL's internet business. This merger occurred at the tail end of the dial-up era. Soon after, broadband became the new thing. This faster alternative to internet access effectively killed AOL's company. In 2008, like a passenger bailing from a sinking ship, Time Warner spun off of AOL. When it did, it had a market cap of $36 billion, a $178 billion loss. The newly separated AOL was only valued at $2.5 billion. Number 4. Russia sells Alaska. Perhaps one of the biggest mistakes in history, in 1867, Russian Emperor Tsar Alexander II sold Alaska to the United States for just $7.2 million. At the time, Alaska was a trading hub for fur, Chinese fabrics, and other luxurious items. Gold was also discovered, but the royal family was unable to maintain the colony. It was far from self-sufficient and it was being overrun by U.S. settlers. Instead of letting the Americans steal it, Alexander II decided to sell it instead. While that was happening, the public in both countries opposed the deal. Russian newspapers demanded to know how the Tsar could sell land Russians spent a lot of time and effort developing. Alaska, after all, did have factories and gold mines. Americans, on the other hand, saw Alaska as nothing more than an icebox where wild Eskimos drank fish oil for breakfast. Congress wasn't a fan of the idea either. In the end, a deal was signed where the United States would purchase the land, but the amount paid was just symbolic, as it added up to 2 cents per acre. In addition, $165,000 was spent in bribing U.S. senators and newspapers to change their minds about the deal. Number 3. Xerox and Apple. In late 1979, Steve Jobs went to visit Xerox PARC, the innovating branch of Xerox Corporation. Apple was already a hot tech firm, so he offered Xerox the chance to buy 100,000 shares of his company for $1 million. In exchange, he could see what new innovations were being developed at Xerox PARC. This was probably a mistake on Xerox's part. In the 1970s, technology firm Xerox already had a personal computer controlled by a mouse. For some reason, though, they never sold the idea or tried to market it. Another mistake. During the visit, legend goes that Steve Jobs realized the revolutionary concept of the computer mouse. While Xerox eventually gave up on developing personal computers, Jobs was on it and used his inspiration from his visit to the park to create windows, menus, and simplify the computer mouse so it would have just one button. Xerox's version cost $300 and would break within 2 weeks. So Steve Jobs did not steal the mouse because Xerox did not own it, and also he made many modifications to it to improve on the idea. Xerox missed out on the consumer industry completely, but Jobs made those ideas available to everyone. And the rest is history. Number 2. Lost education grant. The state of New Jersey made a very high-profile bid for hundreds of millions of dollars that would go toward education reform. A question worth 5 points on the application asked for a budget confirmation, and the state submitted the wrong year. Governor Chris Christie signed off on the application, and no one confessed who was actually responsible. Whoever it was did not read the questions carefully, and so the state missed out on $400 million. Hopefully they learned their lesson. Read the questions very carefully when you're filling out a form. Number 1. Building collapse. A newly constructed apartment tower that was almost finished just collapsed one day in Shanghai, China. New buyers were clamoring to get their money back, and the assets of the builder were frozen. Construction practices in China are already being questioned since many buildings are just put up in a hurry by inexperienced workers. If the tower had fallen the other way, it could have caused a domino effect, causing all the other buildings to fall over. The concrete piles weren't strong enough to support the 13-story building, and large quantities of earth were removed underneath to build the garage. The earth was dumped by a creek, and the riverbank collapsed, and the foundation got muddy, and it just toppled over. This disaster was investigated, and no collapses similar to the Lotus Riverside Block Tower has happened since, that we know of. Thanks for watching! There are many other expensive mistakes, but I couldn't fit them all in this video. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!